thrashed against my restraints, desperate to escape the agony that threatened to consume me. But Ethan showed no mercy. My name is Jima, and I'm 19 years old. I've always been introverted, never quite fitting in, always feeling like an outsider. My circle of friends is small, and the weight of loneliness sits heavy on my shoulders. Sarah is my only true friend, my lifeline in this sea of isolation. One day, Sarah suggested I try a dating app. I recoiled at the idea, feeling a surge of unease at the thought of exposing myself to the dangers lurking in the digital world. But Sarah was persistent, assuring me that I could proceed cautiously, dipping my toes into the waters of online dating before fully committing. That night, loneliness consumed me like a ravenous beast. Sarah's suggestion echoed in my mind, growing louder and more enticing with each passing moment. Eventually, I relented and created an account on the dating app. Among the countless profiles, one stood out like a beacon of hope. His name was Ethan, and his profile exuded confidence and wealth. With trembling fingers, I swiped right, my heart racing with anticipation. Almost immediately, a message appeared from Ethan. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and before I knew it, we were chatting like old friends. Days turned into nights, and the bond between us deepened with each passing moment. Then came the invitation. Ethan suggested we meet at a secluded restaurant, his voice dripping with charm and promises of companionship. Despite a flicker of doubt, I couldn't resist the allure of finally breaking free from my loneliness. As the day of our meeting approached, apprehension gnawed at my insides. But I pushed aside my fears, eager to grasp onto the hope of connection. When the day arrived, I made my way to the restaurant, my heart pounding in my chest. But as I scanned the room, Ethan was nowhere to be found. Panic clawed at my throat as I realized I had fallen into a trap, lured by the false promises of a predator hiding behind a charming facade. Alone and vulnerable, I stood frozen in the midst of the bustling restaurant, my mind racing with thoughts of what could have happened. Was Ethan real, or just a sinister phantom conjured from the depths of the internet? I stumbled out into the cold night air, the echoes of my footsteps mingling with the pounding of my heart. The darkness seemed to close in around me, suffocating and relentless. And as I wandered aimlessly through the empty streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes were following my every move. Suddenly, my phone rang, piercing the silence like a scream in the night. With trembling hands, I answered, only to hear Ethan's voice on the other end. "Where are you?" "I'm waiting for you," he said, his tone unnervingly calm. "I'm almost there," I replied, my voice quivering with unease. "I'm outside the restaurant in my car. We're going to another place," Ethan explained, his words sending a chill down my spine. "Why?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Ethan hesitated before replying, "I'm vegan. Can we go to another restaurant?" Reluctantly, I agreed, the sense of foreboding growing stronger with each passing moment. As I climbed into Ethan's car, a feeling of apprehension washed over me, like a cold hand gripping my heart. "We're going to a restaurant that's a bit further away. It'll take some time," Ethan informed me, his voice smooth, but tinged with something sinister. I nodded, my stomach growling with hunger. Ethan handed me a bottle of water, and I drank eagerly, the cool liquid soothing my parched throat. But as the minutes ticked by, a strange drowsiness crept over me, my eyelids growing heavy as if weighted down by invisible chains. Panic surged through my veins as I realized something was terribly wrong. Before I could react, darkness consumed me, swallowing me whole like a beast lying in wait. And as I slipped into unconsciousness, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had fallen into a trap from which there might be no escape. As consciousness slowly seeped back into my mind, I found myself in a nightmarish scenario, straight out of a horror film. I was lying on a cold, metal table in what appeared to be an operating theatre, my limbs bound and a gag silencing my screams. My eyes darted around the room, panic seizing hold of my heart as I caught sight of Ethan. He was clad in a blood-stained white dress, his face twisted into a grotesque mask of madness. He moved towards me with slow, deliberate steps, wielding a syringe filled with an unknown substance. My body trembled as he injected the drug into my veins, its effects rippling through me like a wave of despair. I tried to fight against it, to resist the encroaching darkness, but it was futile. As the drug began to take hold, Ethan's grin widened, a chilling sight that sent shivers down my spine. With a steady hand, he raised a gleaming scalpel and made an incision across my abdomen, the pain searing through me like a white-hot flame. I thrashed against my restraints, desperate to escape the agony that threatened to consume me. But Ethan showed no mercy, his hands moving with cold precision as he began to remove my organs one by one. I screamed until my throat was raw, each cry a desperate plea for salvation. But Ethan remained unfazed, his eyes gleaming with sadistic delight as he continued his grisly work. Finally, when he had taken all he desired, Ethan leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear. "Your eyes are so beautiful," he whispered, before wrenching them from their sockets with a sickening crunch. Left alone in the desolate hospital room, I lay in a pool of my own blood, the echoes of Ethan's laughter ringing in my ears. Time blurred into a haze of agony and despair, each passing moment a torment I could scarcely endure. It wasn't until a day later that my salvation came, as my best friend, guided by the GPS on my phone, stumbled upon the scene of my nightmare. They cut through my bonds and carried me to safety, but the horror of what I had endured would haunt me forever. Through tear-stained eyes, I learned the truth about Ethan. He was a black market organ smuggler, preying on unsuspecting girls he met through dating sites. The mere thought of his existence filled me with a rage so potent it threatened to consume me. If ever our paths were to cross again, I swore I would be the instrument of his demise. For Ethan had created a hell from which I would never truly escape, and in the depths of my despair, I found the resolve to ensure he paid dearly for his sins.
He was officially dead. The people in chat started complimenting the torture, talking about how it had been another good time, starting to set a date for the next showing. I was a senior in high school at the time, and I was definitely no popular kid. My friends were the oddities of the school, the few people who dared to defy the norm. It was them who told me about the deep web, a place on the internet where you're completely unwatched, anonymous, capable of doing whatever you want. Of course, I was intrigued. Most of my friends just used it to buy drugs, but I thought a little bigger. I wanted to know what happened in the darkest parts of the deep web, whether or not my friends were telling the truth when they talked about horrible fetish sites and assassins you could hire to kill anyone you like. Of course, I wasn't planning on using any of it. I've never been particularly interested in sex, so fetish sites don't interest me, and there's really nobody I like to kill. It was the mystery of it all that fascinated me. Going to these sites would be like peering into a side of the world only a few have ever seen, like a wholly new experience. At the time, I was tired of the monotony of life. I get up at the same time every day, go to school, attend the same classes, talk to the same people, go home, play some games, do homework, go to sleep, and then it repeat. I wondered if other people got tired of that. Anyway, it took me a while to actually dive into the deep web. As fascinated as I was, I had been warned of what could happen to me. I read the stories I talked about too. Who isn't afraid of being threatened by hackers or stalked by some creep you piss off online? That kind of stuff kept me from actually going on the deep web, until the day I manned up and decided that it was time to break the monotony. It was time to delve into the underbelly of the internet. Time to see a world I had only dreamed of. For the first week or so, it was boring. It was just drug sites and stuff where people expose government secrets or whatever. Nothing as dark as I expected. I don't even do drugs, so that was useless to me, and I wasn't into politics. There wasn't really much I was into back then, so I was disappointed. The only reason I kept exploring was my sheer desire to experience the world I thought existed on the deep web. That world was darker than any drug site. That world had murder, torture, messed up porn for messed up people, and all sorts of nasty stuff. I eventually got my wish though. Just when my apathy towards the deep web got to its highest point, I found what I was looking for. The site didn't have a name. I thought it was a broken link for a bit since it only led me to a black screen. Right before I could click out, however, a chat box opened on the screen. Someone using the name admin typed in the chat box saying, "Congrats, you found the worst place on the net." I stared at the screen, more bemused than afraid. It took me a moment to type back, "Cool." That's all I said. I mean, what else was there to say? I'm here to see your finest torture porn. A moment after, the admin replied, "You want in?" I hesitated. All those horror stories flooding back into my head, but it was too late to chicken out. This was what I came for. Even if I just clicked out at the first sign of danger, I had to see what was there. I had to break the monotony. I had to know. I hastily typed back, not allowing myself to stop. "Yeah." The chat box closed and I was led directly. A man was shoved inside, blindfolded and naked, except for a pair of black briefs. He was followed by a woman, this one dressed in all black. Her face was covered by a mask. In an instant, the chat room went wild. I almost closed the window to spare myself, knowing immediately where this was going, but again, I told myself that this is what I wanted. Maybe not the torture, but the window into the very worst parts of the world. The woman pulled a knife from her pocket and cut off the man's blindfold as she shoved him into the chair. He didn't struggle for a moment, and once his eyes were visible, I could see why. It looked like he'd been drugged. Resisting was impossible. I frowned, glanced to the side. This was messed up. I knew this was messed up. My conscience told me to call the cops or at least click out, but I was forced to watch myself. She turned the camera, pointing the knife at the man's throat. One of the people typed in chat, "One of the fingers, cut off one of his fingers." I clenched my hands into fists, taking in a sharp breath. Was this really happening? Was I just gonna watch this as a guy got mutilated as a small crowd of people watched in glee? I felt like throwing up, a feeling that only worsened when the woman nodded and turned to the man, grabbing his limp hand and carefully slicing off one of his fingers. Blood spurted from the wound and the man moaned in pain, but he couldn't fight back. Breathing heavily, I hovered my cursor over the X, planning on getting out of there, but I didn't. The woman looked unimpressed, as if she thought the people in chat could do better. Another person called up for a slice up the man's arm, and she complied. He was bleeding heavily now, clearly in deep pain, but these people were sick. They were cheering her on from chat, suggesting new and painful tortures for her to inflict. Eventually, I stopped breathing heavily. I stopped feeling sick. It was starting to grow on me. By the end, the man was on the ground covered in blood and breathing heavily. I watched this for around half a minute. Then the people in chat were starting to die down. They'd inflicted enough pain. They had their fun. It seemed like things were wrapping up. Funny, I thought, how it was just over when I was getting into it. I smirked. This was exciting. This was better than any game I could play. Much better than any class I could attend. Better than sitting with a group of nobodies pretending like I cared for a goddamn second about them. This was the world I wanted to see. This was darkness. This was the underbelly. This was reality. I typed in chat for the first time. End him. Slit the throat. She nodded for one last time, bringing the man to his feet before slowly dragging her blade across his throat, sending more of his blood spurting out. Once it was done, she dropped him and he fell to the ground limp. He was officially dead. The people in chat started complimenting the torture, talking about how it had been another good time, starting to set a date for the next showing. On screen, the woman left the room, leaving the corpse behind. Of course, I hastily wrote down the date for the next showing. This was going to be a part of my life now. I was going to be a part of something bigger. I was going to command these people's deaths. What a rush. So yeah, I still love the deep web. I'm in college now, and I'm even more immersed in the deep web. I've seen some stuff people would freak out just knowing exists. I've been around every sick porn site known to man, and I finally broken the monotony of life. Inspirational, right? How one high schooler defies the boredom inherent in his life by discovering his true passion. I love the deep web. During my first semester of college, I had recently broken up with my first ever real girlfriend. We had a healthy relationship since high school and we did everything together, and there has only been one minor argument in the 6 years we had been together. The reason for our breakup was because she was moving to another state with her family, which I still forget the reason till this day. Needless to say, over the next few months I was beyond depressed. Every day I had attended my classes, go home, do homework, and go to my room sobbing in tears. For the next few weeks, it started to become a cycle, and I couldn't help it as I would never be seeing her again, or at least not for a long time. Fast forward a few months later, my depression slowly started to go away, and I started talking to more people and interacting with more friends. One day, I came home extremely depressed as my friends brought up my ex, and I just sort of turned to the internet for a while to try to get her off my mind. I was looking through Reddit to see if I could find something interesting. I'm normally into funny stuff like comedy, and I didn't find anything like that on Reddit. However, I then saw a post about something called the deep web. That post immediately caught my eye and I clicked on it. I'm not going to go into much graphic detail about what the post actually said, but let's just say it said things about the deep web that were surely fake. Or at least I thought. To list some examples, there were apparently drug sites, assassins you could hire to kill people, weird fetish sites, and even documents and files that the government doesn't want the public to see or know about. This seemed like something I'd be interested in. Not the fetish sites or anything like that, but I wanted to see for myself what the actual deep web was all about. It said to download a browser called Tor. They recommended other browsers, but Tor was apparently the best browser to use when going on the deep web. I knew how to install Tor and get everything set up, as I'm good with stuff like that. After a few clicks of getting everything ready, I was now officially on the so-called deep web. I found something called the Hidden Wiki. There was something called editors' picks, volunteers, and something called introduction points, so yeah, nothing too dark. I scrolled down and discovered categories such as drugs, adult content, porn, and Bitcoin. Now I thought that I was actually getting somewhere with this. I clicked on drugs, and to my surprise, there were drug websites, at least 100 of them. Of course I wasn't buying any, as I'm not the type of person to get involved with any illegal activity. After more searching, I found forums that had discussions about where to find torture and illegal pornography. I was shocked and was considering that maybe that post wasn't lying after all. Did this stuff really go on in the darkest parts of the internet? However, curiosity got the best of me and I stupidly decided to keep searching. Eventually, I found a list of links that led to something. They weren't the usual websites that we're all familiar with, like www or .com or .net. These links were made up of a bunch of random numbers and letters, with each of them ending in .onion. I clicked on one and it led me to a blank page. At first I thought it was a broken link, as the page took a good minute to open. As soon as it did, however, it showed another link that was in a red color with a creepy smiley face next to it. Alarms immediately start going off in my head, and I wanted to click out right then and there, but like I said, curiosity got the best of me once again, and I clicked on the link. You might be thinking that maybe it was just a virus or a hack, but no. What I saw next almost made me puke. I'm not going to name the site, but the site was dedicated to hundreds of photos and even videos of people being tortured, raped, hung, and even whipped. Some of them not even being adults, and you know exactly what I mean by that. Let me just say that I've seen some messed up stuff in my life, from people getting run over to beheadings, but this was beyond that stuff. I would like to mention that I don't mind seeing some dark stuff here and there, but I do have my limits. This was beyond dark and disturbing. I know it sounds hard to believe that stuff like this actually happens, but unfortunately there are some people in this world that are sick in the head who get pleasure out of doing these types of things. I immediately closed down the website and deleted the Tor browser and never went on my computer for a while. I've done more research on the dark web, and a lot of people say that torture and stuff like that don't actually happen, but I'm pretty sure I know more than they do. For those of you who are curious about going on the dark web, please take my advice and don't go there, especially if you don't know what you're doing. I was young and naive and stupid for making that mistake. Don't go on the dark web.